In 1981, the microchip revolution was just beginning to be felt in people's homes. IBM clones, the Commodore CBM and the BBC Micro were beginning to appear in classrooms, small businesses, even our own homes. The future was arriving faster than ever, but in the Cold War 80s we knew that new technology could also mean deadlier weapons. The moment was ripe for TV to dramatise, and children's BBC responded with Codename Icarus. Welcome to Very British Futures, the podcast celebrating genre television from the UK. Today we're looking back to 1981 and Codename Icarus, a 5-part sci-fi thriller aimed at teenagers who were already reading about computers and perhaps even owned a Sinclair ZX81 computer. Taking a break from updating their bulletin board system and wrestling with the moral question of how to use their great intellects, our two returning guests. Nikki Smalley made great contributions to our episodes on The Uninvited and Outcasts, whilst Cara Dennison more recently appeared in our well-received Space 1999 show. Hello to Cara and Nikki, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Hey, Gareth, I'm alright.
And thank you for joining me. Codename Icarus was written by Richard Cooper. Amongst his later television work would be 1987 futuristic adventure Knights of God, which we've covered before. Director Marilyn Fox helmed many well-remembered BBC children's dramas, including Running Scared, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and Archer's Goon. Producer Paul Stone would go on to make The Box of Delights and The Chronicles of Narnia. It starred Barry Angel as Martin, the main protagonist, with a cast including Jack Galloway, Philip Locke and Gordon Kay. It was broadcast on BBC One in the afternoon children's slot between the 8th and the 22nd of December 1981, with a repeat during the summer of 1984. There are spoilers coming up. 15-year-old Martin Smith is regarded as a problem student by his school, but in fact Martin is a maths prodigy who has been secretly communicating via the school computer with an anonymous tutor who's been sending him challenging maths problems. The tutor turns out to be an enigmatic man called John Doll, who works for the Icarus Foundation, a charitable trust which runs academies around the world, giving young science prodigies a chance to reach their true potential. He invites Martin to Falconleigh School. Simultaneously, MI5 is concerned about the failure of the Navy's new missile program. Missiles are being destroyed almost as soon as they're being launched by a laser weapon that shouldn't exist. Agent Andy Rutherford suspects a conspiracy. Working with Frank Broadhurst, a science journalist, his investigation leads to Icarus and his suspension. At Falconleigh School, Martin is increasingly suspicious. With the aid of fellow student Susan, he begins to realise the true nature of the Icarus Foundation. It exploits and combines the work of young geniuses internationally to create powerful new weapons to sell to both East and West. But when he tries to leave the school, he finds he has been post-hypnotically programmed to stay. Rutherford goes undercover at Falconleigh as a new teacher. He finds a conditioned Martin working furiously on equations that will lead to the creation of the ultimate weapon, the quark bomb. With the aid of Martin's brother, Rutherford successfully manages to rescue Martin and Sue from Falconleigh. but Martin's continued paranoia and obsession leads him back for a final confrontation with the head of the Icarus Foundation. So the first question is the usual one I ask. I have a feeling I know what the answer is. Prior to me asking you to do this podcast, had you ever heard of Codename Icarus?
No, in fact, it's really weird. In the last 12 months, there's two different programs from yesteryear, which I've never heard of before and I've watched for the first time. One being this, and the other being The Changes. And I can't believe I'd not seen or heard of either. So yeah, no, it was my first time.
I had not. This was the first I heard of it was from you. I know it did get a Region 1 release, but it went completely under my radar. But as someone who was of that era of children, which, stretched from about the 80s to the early 90s of computers and internet are a huge thing, it may not have been a specific show I watched, but it was a type of show I definitely watched. So it was very fun to see a new one.
It is one I saw at the time. I think that that's why I thought about it for this series. I seem to remember it sort of came out. It was unusual to have anything that was science fiction was relatively rare at that point on BBC TV if it wasn't Doctor Who shaped. So I think that's one of the reasons it stuck in my mind. So overall, what do you make of this series?
Uh, I really liked it. When you told me about what it was going to be about, I thought, oh, this is my kind of show. So I came in positive, but it really was very fun. I was surprised to see sort of tonally the directions it was going, and I was curious how that would go over for a teen, a young adult viewership. But I was very pleasantly surprised at how it balanced this very grown-up genre with these much younger concerns. And this happens a lot with shows that I discover as an adult. I really wish I had been able to see this when I was of the demographic of that age because it would have hit even harder. It would have been perfect for like 13, 14, 15-year-old me especially.
I really enjoyed it. Similar to what Kara said, there's something about the tone, which is, although television pre-noughties, kids' television had a more, if you like, darker tone in general. This, I feel, is even more, not necessarily dark, I suppose, but more, it feels more adult themed. And
Mm.
even the child acting isn't that typical. The fact that the main character's Northern adds to that grittiness in the way that when you watch Threads, it helps carry that theme that with the grit of the accent. And I think that's the overall bit I enjoyed. That as well, actually saying that there's some marvelous performances in there from British actors, who've done many things. What I liked about it is like Gordon Cave, for example. I'd love to know if in the script it said that the character's constantly eating. It made me think like Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11. He always like just very casually just eating while talking about whatever. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and also it doesn't feel dated like many other things of that era. You could remake that today with very few changes, and it still feel very current.
It's interesting you say that about remaking it today, because watching it, what really struck me, how often we're not following the teenage characters. We're often in Whitehall or other sort of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy territory. I found that very interesting that when they wrote it, they weren't worried. Nobody said, "Oh, this, the kids are going to get bored with all these, guys in suits talking their spy jargon, and it's all quite political and
It's also a bit weird as well, though, isn't it? That Martin is this supposedly the main character. I would argue he's not completely likable as a main character. I think there's times where he gets quite annoying, and way he talks to the others is a bit put downy. But it doesn't seem to matter. If I were to other characters sort of fill in that gap, it's really odd.
He
Yeah.
was very
Well,
much a teenager in my mind. He was a perfect teenager. And I think a lot of us are like that, especially when, I look at the position he was in, where, deep down, he's got the teen issue if he wants to be understood, he wants to be heard. And in the quote unquote normal world, he's accused of cheating. He can't just do
Mm.
something well. And then he finally gets into a world where he is given credit for what he does, and it's still bad. So
mm.
I think, yeah, he was a bit annoying at times, but I think I'd be annoying too if that happened.
Maybe it's just unusual then for it to be maybe a more realistic display of a teenager as opposed to other shows of that era, which would just be, like in Famous Five, no one ever has a teenage strop. They're all just very happy and twee, if you know what I mean. Where
Yeah, it was they weren't trying to make him likable and relatable and marketable. They were trying to make him real. And I think that's a big part of why this worked for me. I think if he had been sanitized and likable, I wouldn't have gotten into it as much as I did.
I think that's very true. I think one of the things I do like about it, and it's a quality of its time, it's kind of before everything got a bit. Charlie Brooker has a good phrase for this: aspiration TV. There's a glamour. Everyone's kind of trying to be sexy and chiseled. This has got real, crumpled looking British people in it, which I really like. Yes, I like the in some ways the grayness of it, which because that is a very yes, this is set in the real world. There's not much sun in this. Whereas it's interesting if they were coming up with this today, I think definitely two things. One, everyone would be good looking, and they'd hit the gym and were looking after themselves. Unless they were particularly evil, because that's okay. They can look as rough as anything if they're
Yeah.
evil.
You'd
Um,
have the Disney Channel kids basically.
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And also there probably would be a bit more, well, I think they definitely would get notes saying it's got to be the teen story, sort of like, and it's got to be them kind of uncovering and discovering everything. Whereas this story, it pulls up a good trip because the audience is often a little bit ahead of Martin about what's going on, and that can become a bit dull because you're kind of waiting for the character to discover what you already know. But they get the balance right. We're aware of this wider context, but he's still discovering things himself about this mysterious school, which is also, again, going back to the realism, I think that's a quite believable kind of school as well. I mean, actually, full of this is just a memory watching it. I remember there's a bit early, I think it's second episode, where it's a sign of how special the school is that he gives them this catalogue and says, "Oh, you can choose the furniture for your room, and we'll have it delivered tomorrow." That seemed amazing to me. As someone who's used to look at the Argos catalogue or the John Freeman catalogue and dream of these things, and that bit stuck with me. I thought, oh yeah, dear me, I'm very easily bought. What can I say? So yeah, I think it is, and I think it's also I like that the ultimate plan is quite believable as well. What the Icarus Foundation ultimately proves to be doing, that's just like selling arms to both sides, allegedly in this kind of power balancing sort of behind the scenes, and that seems a very believable plan to me.
yeah, absolutely, and also it taps into those things that again relate to what Fred's doing. It was the fears of the time, that Cold War thing and missiles, and if someone has dominance over it. Um, the only thing I would say I find a bit strange about the sh not strange, but in most shows you have your heroes and your villains, and often in those kids shows you'll have a main character you focus on, or a gang of kids, and then you'll have either a group of villains we're ahead of, or
Hmm.
a main villain, and it's sort of weird that in your head, I think you typecast the doll character as the main villain, and then all of a sudden in that last episode, obviously the big boss just turns up, and he's just there for like the last big reveal and all this, and you thought, well, that's a bit left field, isn't it?
It is, but it felt very almost like video game to me, where, that's obviously that's before the kinds of video games I'm talking about, but it's like you
Mm.
go on, you go on, you go on, you go on, you fight what you think is the final boss, but then they either get, oh, there was someone bigger behind them, or oh, they just changed form entirely. So on the one hand, narratively, it was like, yeah, that is weird, but then the gamer in me was like, yep, nope, should have expected that.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
was an interesting way to go.
Got fear of technology, which is always a theme in science fiction. So there's the early days of the home computing revolution. And at this time, and I remember when he starts using that Commodore CBM computer at school, that brought back memories because I don't know about. In fact, this is my question to you: what's your early memories of computers? And certainly, I remember that computer with the green screen and the text, and that it's built like a tank out of metal, basically with this huge keyboard, typewriter keyboard on it. I remember that, even though I had, I'm a Spectrum. If you're listening to this in the UK and you're of a certain age, you'll know what I mean. If I say I was a Sinclair Spectrum owner, and I can remember typing in reams of listings out of magazines to make games. So I was just wondering about your sort of early memories of computing.
I've talked about my grandfather a lot because, he was my father, basically,
Mhm.
worked at NASA, and some of my earliest memories are of computers. I had a Mac Classic.
Mhm.
So my grandfather said when I was very young, he said, in the future, you're not going to be able to have a job or get through the day without knowing how to use a computer. So I want you to be raised around computers. I want you to
Ah.
grow up alongside them. And he was not wrong, as evidenced by what we are doing right now. But yeah, I was, even in, 5, 6 years old, I had pretty much where I'm sitting now, had a little Mac Classic right here. And I would play freeware games to learn how to use a computer, had a word processor on it program. So those were my early days. We had MS-DOS type computers at
Mhm.
school. I was of an age where we had computer classes once a week, and we would play Carmen Sandiego and Oregon Trail. And I'm very curious who in the audience is of that same sort of mid Gen X millennial border there. But that is a very strong memory. We were very much an age where computer was a skill we were having ingrained in us constantly.
Well, I think it's a bit different in England. I mean, just because I think my dad was always in, not personally, he's not good with computers, but he was always into buying whatever the latest gadget was. So because home computers were sort of a thing, when I was about 5 or 6, he bought me a Commodore 64. That was my first one, which came with Captain America. Um, and I often think that that was my grounding for where I am today as a software engineer, because what I find that modern kids don't have is that skill to work technology out that's a bit more cumbersome. And I remember
Mm.
I had they bought me a printer, which I mean, each letter used to be about probably an inch thick or something. And when you loaded it up and you wanted to write, the screen was black and you would have to paint it white before you start typing. And you'd have to press a shortcut key to paint to get rid of the toolbar to paint behind there. Otherwise, the black lines would all print on your print. And then at school we used acorns, but I think in England we weren't. It never felt like they were trying to get you used to computers. It was just a thing.
Mm.
Never felt like a training, or not until I got to secondary school, at least anyway. It
Mm.
was just plain silly little maths games, if anything.
Oh, we had those
Mm.
too. Number Crunchers was one of ours.
I mean, certainly, I'm of that generation where computers have become my entire life, and everything that I do.
I mean, yeah, it does get, but I think it does capture that early time when the computer was something that was a bit locked away. Only the top year of pupils were allowed to use it, and
Yeah, remembering a time when there were computer rooms and computer labs.
mm,
As even when I was in college, there was still kind of the era of the computer room. Like we had an internet at my college. We had computers in our rooms. Like this was 1999, 2000. But even so, there was still the idea of the computer lab. It's fascinating to see how it's gone from sort of a thing you could go to for a certain amount of time per day to a utility.
Yeah. And it's
mm.
not even this, it's not even a thing, is it? It's like everything, even if it's your phone, it's your watch, it's
Yeah, I
everything.
got another computer right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, whereas about the time, one of the things that did again stuck with me watching this was the first time he gets a message from somewhere else on his
Oh yeah.
computer, which
Yeah.
to me
Yeah.
seemed, that is very creepy. That is the idea of someone, some unknown person suddenly appearing on the computer, which I thought was there. There's also
Yeah.
a nice little bit of writing thing in that we quickly establish this has been happening for a while, and he's been being set all these math problems by this mysterious person. So I'm glad. I think that's a useful little shortcut.
Yeah,
Like I said,
I'm wondering how you would do that nowadays because getting a message from a random person is something that you just try to avoid now. It's like if someone I've never heard of sent me a weird message setting me math problems on my phone, I would just, send to junk, report spam. Like,
Yeah.
definitely, yes. You definitely have to. I think you probably have to. They have to go in a bit harder with the. This is an educational program for.
yeah.
So, yeah, super gifted kids, I think,
Hmm.
and
Explaining that point, Gareth, you've just made me think. I wonder if someone watched Codename Icarus and thought we could make this into a comedy with Whoopi Goldberg, because that's the premise of Jumping Jack Flash, isn't it?
it is, and that
You
yes,
know?
it's a good fun movie. I did actually look up another film. There was a film called Real Genius,
Yes.
which I looked up, thinking, "Oh, is how relevant is this?" And to be honest, it's not that relevant. To
It's
be
fun though.
honest, it is fun. It shares a vague thing about someone's misusing their knowledge to make a super laser weapon.
Yeah, and popping a whole lot of popcorn.
Yeah, that's an impressive scene. But again, I don't think I can claim any direct line. Well, in the early episode, I do like this little that he's kind of going back to Martin for that he's kind of frustrated. He can see he says, maths is beautiful and nobody else can see it. And particularly his nasty maths teacher played, trivia note, by David Briley, who is probably better known now as the voice of K9, and he was for one season he was the voice of K9, and in Doctor Who, and he was also in Freds. He's one of the leading actors in Freds. Puts in a nice little cameo of a classic, sarcastic, unpleasant teacher. I thought.
Yeah.
The mysterious Mr. Doll, played by Philip Locke. What do you make of the Mr. Doll?
I had seen him in Jeeves and Wooster.
Hmm.
He was Glossop. And it was bothering me because he looked so familiar, but that was like 10, 12 years on, so he had aged a bit more. And when I looked
Hmm.
it up, and he was also in Four to Doomsday, speaking of Doctor Who.
He was. That was kind of. I mean, really, this is the first time I'd seen him. So for me, I always think him. Oh, it's that guy from Codename Icarus. And then even when I see him much younger in he's Thunderball. He's one of the henchmen in Thunderball
That's
as
right.
well. But I think he's excellent as the villain. He's very unflappable. No matter what gets thrown at him, he's kind of always got an answer. And it's a nice performance. It's a performance where I think even if you're a young child, you can see he's up to no good. But at the same time, you can't hang anything on him because he's always got an answer. It's a gaslighting, basically, before we knew that
Yes,
phrase.
that was terrifying. Just all the things that happened to Martin. And then having someone who was just ready for whatever he said. It's
Mm.
it's frightening, especially again, talking about when you're a teenager and you're already
Mm.
kind of predisposed to distrust everything because you got all these chemicals in your brain and you're just going nuts. You want to be listened to, you want to be believed. Grown-ups are kind of the enemy right now anyway. And then you have someone who legitimately is kind of out to get you, and that just is a whole other thing. I thought that was brilliantly done, going from the very sarcastic teacher who you could go, well, he's just a jerk, to someone who is much more adept at
Mm.
manipulation.
And he was very good at making you feel like he'd reasoned with Martin about, the decision-making process behind everything, to the point where you just go, oh yeah, fair enough, to some degree. I do think it was a shame that he wasn't the ultimate villain in many ways, because I really just liked watching him, and the fact that you don't really get the other than you get the story behind the main villain, you don't really get much of that character. You don't
Mm.
in that half an hour we have with him.
You just assume it's kind of just greed and power that's driving him. You don't really get any other, yeah, like backstory. You don't, anyway, you don't need the backstory. We talked a little bit about Martin. But what do you make of? I'll start with Nikki here. Of Barry Angel's performance.
I think he's very good, and I was quite surprised because I looked him up afterwards, and like he just seemed to end his career in 1985, the year I was born, and seemingly did know what else. And I thought, well, that's a shame because for a child actor, I thought he was very, very good and very believable. And even though I did say that, I found the character a bit annoying in places, he didn't have that really annoying child actor quality about him that a lot do.
I thought he did a great job. I also looked him up afterwards and kind of had the same reaction. He had so much on his shoulders with this role. That was the main
Mm.
thing I thought, is this was not a simple role. This was a lot to contend with. And I think he navigated these extremes of emotion, these major changes in this character's life, this going from not being believed to being believed but manipulated. The everyone wants them to build super weapons and he just wants to birdwatch and enjoy math. And
Mm.
like I felt that. Yeah, it's such a grim story for him. Finally finds a group of people who believe in what he can do. They use him, and you can feel how much that hurts him in the moments that he's allowed to feel that. Because again, they're not always allowed to remember or feel that.
That's a very I love that, and that's a very good observation. I think it is a good, but like you say, it's a very difficult. He's got to kind of do the whole mental breakdown and convey that, and sort of the disillusionment as well. It's for that I can forgive. I think sometimes he's a little calmed down, but I think that's just the way he decided to do it, because yeah, a lot of the lines come out very aggressive. He's like even when he's kind of trying to make conversation at the breakfast table at the school, it's a bit coming out like that.
I mean,
But
Sue is also being a little creepy at the breakfast table, but that's also because she's had Icarus time. So there was a big contrast between Martin and Sue at the table.
So I was going to say, I think what really interesting about his performance again is going back a little bit, is just the whole thing with the games. I mean, that is such an interesting thing to have in a kids show and get them to grasp this the idea of this game where even this teacher having a mental sparring affecting the whole thinking process. Even as an adult watching it, I was like, crikey, it's a bit much in it for kids.
Yeah.
That would be presented as a kids science fiction show. It was quite a lot.
yeah, it's very theatrical, the game. I can imagine that kind of being done as a fringe show sort of thing. You could do that as a two-hander. That's what really jumped out at me in those scenes. It's a touch of the prisoner in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do need to talk a little bit about Sue, who you just mentioned there, Cara, played by Debbie Farrington.
Mhm.
And what do you think about her performance?
I did think she was very interesting. She was kind of like I said, when she first comes in, I think I wrote down, I'm looking at my notes, first note is absolutely creepy in episode 2. But also that's not a commentary on Sue. That's more, I said, I could tell it's because she's meant to be brainwashed, so I guess that's effective. You know, she's kind of the metric for the students here. I think as things go on and, things evolve a little more, we get to see a bit more of her. But there's so much of this show where I think one more episode, and I feel like give Sue a little more breathing room, give the quote unquote final boss a little more breathing room. That's kind of my feeling. She did great with what she had, but I would have loved a 6th episode.
Mm.
Similar to Cara, I felt that they could have given her more to do. I think as a performance-wise, she's absolutely fine. Obviously, the robotic bit just comes across as that sort of upper middle class type, typical that we expect in children's telly of that era. Um, whereas later on, when she's finally, maybe clicking on to things, I do think she comes into her own a bit more. But again, as Kara says, it's just not enough. Uh,
She just got one of my favorite lines, and it's one of those. Oh, I love that. 'Cause it's one of those lines. There's a lot packed into it. In that when they go to her room, and he sees that picture of her parents. Who are they? And she says, "Father is behind her, clapping. They take turns."
Mm, hmm.
And then that you fill in all this about living in the shadow of two very accomplished people who it appears may not have a lot of time for her.
Yeah.
which is quite different as well, because obviously we did in that first episode, you do get to see a lot of Martin's parents, and get where he's come from and what they're.
Mm,
And even though he's supposed to be in the shadow of his brother, even though in reality Martin is clearly the more cleverer one in
mm,
the end. It's interesting that they really don't treat him like that. They are on his side. They do that bit
mm.
of thing. Have you done this, lad? Yeah, ultimately, they are on his side and support him, which is quite unusual, really.
Actually, it's interesting, and that bit where you kind of just dropped into the acts, there is as nice as it is to see Northern leading characters, they're just a touch too Northern in that
Parents,
slightly.
yeah,
There's just a touch of the month of the ale. I'm very Northern, me, and
yeah.
there's a and his mum, and there's a bit where and they're waiting at the school, and she's kind of standing there clutching her handbag. There's something just a touch pythony about
Wouldn't be
about
out of
them.
place in like an Andy Cap type cartoon or something.
Yeah.
And then they go to his house, and his brother's there with the sleeveless sweater on as well.
Yeah.
Well, here's some coding to let you know that they are Northern working class people. Sort of like. And before we leave the school, I just want to mention the school disco. I don't know about you. Do you enjoy it? I thought that was properly authentic. Talking about realism, it was an authentically awkward event. I thought.
I don't really recall ever doing a school disco when I probably did when I was in primary school, but I don't recall it.
I never went to any. I know they were a big thing for some people, but how about yourself, Cara? Did you kind of go to these
I think
kind of events?
that was a little before my time. We
Hmm.
we didn't really do those kind of things, but also for a lot of my schooling, I went to a Catholic school, and we didn't even have a football team to have a homecoming about. So
Oh.
we we didn't really do much of the stereotypical school anywhere thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of thing that kind of awkwardness transcends boundaries, I think.
that first episode, my only criticism of that would be, I know you can argue a lot of first episodes or start of a season can be slow, but it didn't feel like it was completely the setup that
Mm,
made it slow. Because
mm,
I did find that first episode slower than the the following four. Um,
mm,
I just felt like there were just too much going on because you were seeing Martin, you were they were getting him to the school, but arguably you could have started with him at a much later point where he's doing the math thing and just have him discovered as opposed to all the bits leading up to it, and then obviously because of the other storyline with the government and investigating who's trying to intercept the missiles and everything. I don't know. I just found it a bit. It could have been paced a bit better for me,
mm,
anyway.
Yeah, I feel like the goal there, not saying it succeeded necessarily, but I feel like as I look at it, the goal was to draw that delineation between these two lives.
mm,
And on some level, I think it's, tonally, I think it succeeded. Pacing wise, I'm kind of the same opinion that felt it felt a little odd.
Like in the rest of the episodes, they get that duality
Yeah,
perfect. But both things that's happening, you're watching it and you're totally into either side. But
yeah.
that
mm,
first, and I think it is obviously that thing that you're thinking what's going on, and it
mm.
takes you ages to realize that one and one makes two. But I just found that particularly slow.
So we move outside Falconleigh now and consider as I alluded to earlier, the spy espionage side of the story. That's quite creditable, really. You could put this on early evening, and I don't think anyone would think it was too childish, really, in those scenes. And I'm gonna what people make of Jack Galloway's performance.
Trying to think it's my first time seeing Jack Galloway in something.
It's funny.
Uh,
He does have a kind of face that looks familiar, but looking at his CV, I've not really crossed paths. Although I will say, am I the only one who gets Matt Berry vibes from him?
a, a little bit. Um, it looks like he's been in a Doctor Who, he's been in a Poirot, so I've probably seen him somewhere.
It's one of
Somewhere.
those actors that probably just you see him but you don't know him type of thing.
He's sort of matured into, he plays lots of authority figures, it looks like, these days. But here he is back in 1981 in not quite James Bond, a more realistic little bit of a spy. And I think it's a decent performance.
I enjoyed his performance. I thought he were great. I loved the character's doggedness to get to, the crux of the mystery, and his relationship as well with Gordon Kay's character, who at times I was a bit confused by because Gordon Kay, I did well, at one point think that Gordon Kay was playing multiple sides.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you sort of got that car where you
That
because there was like this one bit where you felt like you were trying to put him off, and I thought, oh, is he trying to put him off because he's in it? He's in the thing, and then that never occurred. But yeah, I thought he was great actually. To say I didn't recognize him from anything.
Yeah, I thought he was really good. I especially liked when he was going like straight in undercover. I Those were my favorite scenes where he went into Falconleigh and I mean, I always have a soft spot for anyone who's like doing the right thing in spite of, someone who's just going against the current even when, going against their orders. His scenes with Martin were very fun. Speaking of Gordon Kay, I mainly know him from Allo Allo. So,
Yeah, I
um
think most people know him
Yeah.
from Hello Hello.
we only know what PBS puts up to a certain point. We only know what PBS chooses to pick up in their big box of British
Hmm.
shows. And I was sitting there staring at him for the longest time, going, "Why do I know him? Why do I? He looks like Rene." And then I looked it up, and it was yeah,
It is. He's a good, fun character. He makes it, but in some ways, his character is a bit of a. a handy plot device in that he can just go and he can deliver all this exposition and fill in all these details, but he does it so well, so charmingly, and with his kind of fey
Yeah.
northernness.
You had a great point that nowhere did this feel like it was sort of talking down at all.
Hmm.
Um, when we were first getting the very divided kid and adult storylines, I was actually sitting there for a minute going, do I have the right show? And because I am very used from the American side of things to a
Hmm.
lot of kid and teen shows really dumbing it down, which is
Mm.
unfortunate. I mentioned Disney
Hmm.
Channel. There's they tend to go one way or the other, which is they dumb things down way too much to the
Hmm.
point that they do not hold up under scrutiny. You poke one plot hole and the whole thing falls apart, or they aim too high to the point that they focus only on the adults and they forget the kids are there. So seeing this nice central thing where it's like you have a spy story where one of the central figures happens to be a teenager in an adult world,
Hmm.
and seeing the adult actors, nowhere did I believe that they had been called in to do a show for young people. They were going fully serious. They were giving it everything they had. And it's a shame that to me that is unusual. I wish it
Hmm.
wasn't.
But I mean, it was such a great caliber of actors they got in. I can't believe actually, because obviously I recognize Peter Sellier. I've seen him
Hmm.
in other things, and when I was googling him, I couldn't believe he was still alive, 96 years old.
Oh, wow.
Um,
I didn't know that.
yeah, he's still, and you just naturally assume that he's one who's, faded into history, but he's very much still alive. But obviously, he's one of those actors that not he won't you won't call him a household name, but you know him because he was probably in everything, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Peter Sellier, who plays Sir Hugh Francis. Yeah, if you need a government minister, he's your go-to man.
Yeah.
Oh, there he was in Yes, Prime Minister. Uh,
He was very
Rumpole the
good in
Bailey.
that.
I know exact now that you say that, I'm like, yes, I've seen him in many things.
Hmm.
Denholm Elliott in the fact that not a lot of people know his name, but he's in everything. He just turns up and you go, I know who he is. He's good in.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. He's a very reliable. And like I say, people aren't kind of phoning it in. The two people who were kind of Andy's henchmen, although that makes them sound a bit sinister, his kind of fellow operatives. And but I like they've got a definite sort of Sweeney vibe to them. So yes, so Rutherford sneaks into Icarus or Falconleigh School. What's striking is that in many ways the evil organization is undone by their complacency.
Hmm.
Basically, they don't imagine because it's a touch of a TV trope, but he Rutherford does have a lot of free range for to go all around this school investigating without seemingly anyone thinking anything untoward.
yeah, I love the scene where he was like, "Oh, can you just go check this thing? I'm fine covering this room." And the guy's like, "Yeah, why not?" And he just goes in, grabs the tape, and he's like, "Yep, nothing happened here, thanks." And I'm guessing nothing like that has happened before.
That did kind of amuse me. I mean that's one of those. Admittedly, you can hear the gears going a little bit in that bit, but fair enough.
Yeah.
We're going back to that pacing thing. We're building up the pace. He's allowed to do that.
One bit that did sort of ruin it, which a lot of TV does, and it always annoys me, is when he's hiding in that room, and the guy comes in and opens the door, and he's all he is just stood behind the door, and it's clearly obvious as you know that if it were you and you were there, you would send someone behind that door, but
Right.
he don't even look round. He just sort of goes, "Yeah, there's no one in here," and shuts the door again.
I now want to do a video of all those moments in TV shows when that happens.
In D&D terms, crit botched your perception check. Rolled a one and went, nope, no one's in here.
So he succeeds in rescuing Martin and Sue from this place. In other shows, that would have been the end, but we've still got a while to go yet, and in the cottage. And I do, and going back to the thing about Martin's disillusionment. I think those scenes where the captured teacher, whose name has slightly wandered away from me at this moment, but his kind of original teacher at the school, and
Yeah.
he's been kidnapped for Rutherford to take his place, and he's saying all that thing about, oh, you have nowhere to go, you're a freak. I found that, quite grim.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the final confrontation between Martin and Frolic?
What I would say is I thought it was really well played. Even I was thrown by this new baddie that had
Mm.
just come out of nowhere. I thought the dialogue was great and the conversation they have and where um, he's talking about Frolic's talking about Martin wasting his genius and so on and so forth, and he's just like, I want to be true to the maths and all this thing. I thought that was great. And even though you know that when all that's over, you know that the police or whatever is going to go catch a Frolic or whatever, but it's just like once he finishes that dialogue, it just ends. And I
Mm.
found that a bit jarring. I was a bit like, oh, so it's ended. There's no wrap up. Even if it were just like, an over the end credits, you see someone pulling him into a police car or something, I think I'd have been a bit more satisfied. But it was just like, it's over now. Just go away. We've done with you.
Yeah, there was very much a sort of and that's all of the show they wrote kind of thing to the very end of it. He was a very interesting character, especially amidst what the other grown-ups and arms dealers were up to, that he had a motivation that was not money. It still was messy. All the grown-up motivations were pretty messy. Yeah, I agree. Again, I wish there had been a sixth episode. I wish there had just been a little more wiggle room for
Mm.
the fact that this was happening. And he was such an interesting character in the brief time he had, and such an interesting
Yeah.
nemesis,
Mm.
on top of everything that we'd already seen and gotten used to. I really wish that he had had more room to breathe. The dialogue he did get, I agree, it was great, but
Mm.
it was all just so packed in.
Yes, I mean, I think it's quite brave, and I do like it. I mean, it seems very appropriate that it ends the series rather than going for a kind of shooty action sort of ending. It ends with a debate of
Yeah,
ideas, which ties in with the whole theme of the series. So I think, yeah, that scene between them is marvelously done, with the Edward Frolic incidentally being played by actor John Malcolm. Yeah, I agree. It is a very abrupt ending. It's like, oh, freeze frame, and we're out of it. I would have quite liked to have seen Martin, get us an invitation to Oxford or something, or
Yeah.
and it's sort of like, oh, things are going to, some sense of, oh, it's going to be a bit better than
yeah,
the picture painted by his terrible first teacher. But maybe they wanted it to end on a little bit of unsettlingness, which is not a
maybe.
word, but I'm sticking with it. And,
I'd love to have read the novelized. Unfortunately, I did try to see if I could get hold of the novelization before, but
mhm.
it's not that difficult. It's not that easy. I would have loved to have known how it ends in that. I can't imagine
Yeah.
that just ends on the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, it is unusual that it's written by the same Richard Cooper who wrote the TV series, and he did the same thing again with the Knights of God. He wrote the novelization of that. I haven't actually read it. I'm told it's pretty close to the TV series. I did, yeah, like you, I did look it up on eBay, but it's no, I decided not to. Although weirdly, I kind of remember it being a shot, or maybe I'm just remembering the caption that would have come up at the end of the episode on BBC saying, "And there's a book of Codename of Icarus is available now in all good bookshops." Is there anything you'd like to say that I've not really covered? That you've got in your notes that I've not really talked about. So, and I've been spending quite a bit of time in the 80s, relatively recently, with recent shows I've been covering on this podcast. And again, the bomb is, as ever, casting a shadow over, well, not just science fiction, but a lot of drama. But certainly here, with all the talk about the quark bomb, supposedly ultimate weapon. But thankfully, Martin is clever enough to see there is no such thing. So, sort of wrap up your thoughts on Codename Icarus.
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, having a 5 episode format does kind of limit what you can do from a storytelling standpoint, and I wish there had been more. But at the same time, I think this really sums up for me what good teen and young adult entertainment is, where instead of trying to dumb it down, the best thing to do if you want to write teen insert genre here, write the genre, put a teen in it, see what happens. And it seems to have gone very well for this. So
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, you write the genre. You don't worry too much about the audience, apart from
you look at the young adult perspective. You go, all right, if they were surrounded by this kind of thing, how would they react? What does being someone who's younger and in this stage of life do to how you perceive these things? Younger people deserve good stories as much as anyone else.
How about yourself, Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything Cara said there. It were nice to watch something that I wasn't even aware of, which is unusual for me. And I enjoyed every bit of it, and I love the fact that it doesn't, other than the obvious things of like clothes and stuff, it isn't dated. You could watch that now and be completely satisfied with everything about its themes and the writing and the way it's portrayed. Excellent stuff.
Well, I'd like to turn away from this realm of spies and secrets and stuff for a moment and find out what you're both up to yourselves at the moment. I'll start with Nikki. How?
Well, dully, very little at the moment, other than enjoying a couple of weeks forced leave, messing with my 3D printer and things like that. Just work. I've not had much on the cards for a while in terms of podcasts and stuff. So thank you again for inviting me on, and happy to do it anytime. Enjoying life.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And thank you again. You mentioned 3D printing. Nikki did post me recently a lovely recreation of the tripod's cap, which it's in the front room. It's in the front room. It's with my Funko figures at the moment. And how about yourself, Cara? You are a busy person, I know.
I am. I am still writing with Crunchyroll and Otaku USA on anime topics. I'm working with Obverse Books as an editor for the Black Archive line and a contributing writer. I'll have another book out sometime in the future. It's with them for editing. This one on a classic story rather than a new one. Other than that, I also blog once a week at caradenison.com. You can read book reviews, see where my work's being published, and whatever else I'm up to, watching stuff, trying new tea, showing off my guinea pigs.
And there will be a link to Cara's blog in the text accompanying this podcast. Well, I think it only remains me to say thank you very much for all your insights and for taking the time to watch this and come on the show. It's been great fun. So let's say thanks to you, and thank you to you at home for listening and to carrying on supporting this podcast. I look forward to us all meeting up again soon.
Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you.
Richard Cooper novelised his scripts as a paperback, which was released straight after the first broadcast. The series was released by BBC Video in a slightly edited omnibus edition on VHS in 1985 and by Home Vision Entertainment in unedited episodes on DVD in the USA and Canada in 2006. Very British Futures is hosted and produced by Gareth Preston, with special guests Cara Dennison and Nikki Smalley. Music by Chattery Art. If you can take a moment to rate us on your podcast app or share our social media posts, that would be much appreciated. You can get in touch with the podcast via Very British Futures Podcast at gmail.com. Follow us on X at FuturesVery or visit our Facebook page. This has been a Phantom Frame production.